I could have talked to Chris Cuthbert, you know. Yeah, Chris Cuthbert, the modern voice of hockey in Canada. I could have talked to him. It was just him and me, all alone in a bookstore. It was like 1998, Kingston, Ontario. And I didn't say a word to the guy, and you know what? I still regret it. More on the other side, kids. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. Now look, when I shuffle off this mortal coil, when I go to the big podcast booth in the sky and I'm starting to fade out and my synapses are firing, you know, and little blips and bleeps of memories are coming through, and there's one that's hockey, the voice I'm gonna hear is Bob Cole, okay? Bob Cole is the voice of hockey for me. And even though I may live another, 40 years maybe, the way modern medical science is going, it's reasonable to expect to live to be 100 and perhaps well beyond. Now, if we open up the stem cell thing, get some proper treatments going, begin eventually to regenerate our own organs, maybe we can live on indefinitely. And should I live on indefinitely for another 200 years, the voice of hockey will still be Bob Cole to me, okay? Now, some of my European fans, listeners, let's use listeners. I always use, anytime I say the word European, I'm usually writing or talking about, playing music over there. And so fans automatically follows the word Europeans, okay? In this case, fans is maybe not the right choice of word. It was just a natural sort of force of habit, you know what I mean? My European listeners may be a little bit clued out right now as to what I'm talking about. But if you're Canadian and you're a fan of sports, even if you're not, if your significant other is and you've been forced to sit on the couch and watch the hockey match, chances are Bob Cole is the voice in your head too. Now, this is an all-time legendary play-by-play guy, all right? One of the all-time greats in any sport, in any time. Now, I haven't heard them all, but I've heard enough to know that Bob Cole is the voice of an overtime goal in Game 7 of the playoffs, all right? But, come the 90s, and broadcasting hockey branched off from just basically the CBC on Saturday night. And for those of us who needed to find it, the Canadiens game on French CBC. The other kind of sound of hockey in my youth is French people talking about the Canadiens winning the cup, which I got to experience more than once, Leaf fans. Bob Cole was the guy, though, all right? Bob Cole's the guy, but then come mid-90s, we branched off. We had, like, TSN come in and Sportsnet. Maybe that was the 80s, but eventually you had more choices, all right? And at a certain point, this young firebrand called Chris Cuthbert began to appear, and he would be commentating the late game or the B game on whatever night it was, and he was doing, like, CFL games on TSN, maybe something like that in the 90s. But obviously one to watch, okay? It was recognized that Chris Cuthbert had a thing. Called a good game, man. Had a lot of intensity in his voice, had a lot of pure emotion. You could tell the dude was into it, okay? And so by late 90s, I'm living in Kingston, ON, and I go to the bookstore, and Chris Cuthbert is becoming a thing at this point in time. And he's got a book out, and it's called The Rink, Stories from Hockey's Hometowns. Now, how Canadian a book is that? So this book was out, and I gather Cuthbert was doing signings, all right? And so I happened to be at a bookstore in Kingston, and I feel like I went up a level to probably where the fantasy and sci-fi books were, because I was a fledgling writer at that point in time. Just beginning to dip my toe in the literary pond, you know what I'm saying? And I began as a fantasy writer because I began as a fantasy reader when I was a kid. Even though I didn't really keep up with reading fantasy, when I began trying to write stuff, that's kind of where I staked out my territory. And I wrote some painfully derivative fantasy stuff that will forever remain buried. But I wrote it, right? And I had to start in it. So I'm at the bookstore, and I would go and I would look at the fantasy books, and I'd just pick up one, and I would flip to the opening page, and there's enormous inspiration for a writer in the opening page, okay? If you're struggling, if you're trying right now to get your own novel off the ground, I can't speak to what comes at the end. I mean, I've made it to the end of the book before, several times, but I can't speak to how you kind of get that to the next level, because I ain't ever made it to the next level. Try though I might. But if you're trying to get it off the ground, there is massive inspiration, okay, in the first page of somebody's book. Looked at one yesterday. I was combing around my bookshelf, and I pulled out the Sugar Frosted Nutsack by Mark Lehner. Mark Lehner, who is arguably my favorite writer of fiction of all time, who incidentally has a new book coming out this year. And we're not just all music all the time here, kids. There's going to be some books going on too, you know what I mean? And Mark Lehner's is going to be one of them. Anyways, Mark Lehner, the writer I most recommend to discerning readers who are, have the constitution to sit down and absorb what's coming at you through a Mark Lehner book. It is not for the weak of heart, kids. Mark Lehner is an incredibly weird, demanding, extremely funny writer. And I pulled out the Sugar Frosted Nutsack, which was his return to fiction after many years of he just disappeared, man. He just ghosted. And he was floating around Hollywood trying to make that happen, And we thought Mark Lehner was gone forever. And then the Sugar Frosted Nutsack appeared. And I just flipped to the opening page. And just from looking at the opening page, I had this overwhelming sense of wanting to write again. And I sat down and tried, and, bugger all happened. But the inspiration came from that opening page. Because the opening page is possibility, man. The opening page is, that first step on the journey. And that's the easy step, man. The hard step is the middle. Everybody can start. I'm a great starter of things, And when you read somebody else's start, it can sometimes inspire you to start too. So in those days, I was working on something. I don't remember what. And I would go to the bookstore in Kingston where I lived, and I would just flip through the opening pages and try to draw an inspiration. You can draw a spark from that, man. There is creative energy in other people's creations. And so you can pull some of that. You can divine some of that, man. And that's what I used to do. So one day, I'm at the bookstore in Kingston, and I'm thumbing through something, and I kind of look up, and Chris Cuthbert is looking at me. Chris Cuthbert standing there awkwardly, probably just a tad embarrassed, wondering what he's doing, at a table with some books, this book that he wrote, and not a single dang person hanging around. Now, I've played that show, kids. I've played that show where you get there and you set up your gear, and you jump in to get ready to go, and there ain't a dang soul in the room. I've played to what Sarah Harmer called that sea of empty seats. I've played for the bar staff. I've played for the other bands on the bill, That's a lousy experience. The lucky thing you get when you're in a band is that it's a shared experience. If you're Chris Cuthbert, and you're doing book signings, and ain't nobody coming around to have the book signed, that's awkward. So I looks up to find Chris Cuthbert, up-and-coming rising star of play-by-play on the TV, looking at me. He's literally looking at me. And there was, in retrospect, kind of a plea in his eyes. And he nodded a little bit and he kind of smiled. And I nodded a little bit and kind of smiled. And I don't know what's going on inside his head, but I think it's, please, dude, put me out of my misery. Please just come over here and talk to me and make it feel like I had somebody interested in my dang book. And what's going on inside my head is, you know, the sound of television going off the air at night. Some of you of a certain age will remember the sound of television going off the air at night. They would play Oh Canada. And there was in the 80s, there was like a great video that accompanied Oh Canada. You can find this on YouTube, and it warms my cockles every time I see it. Sometimes I seek it out, kids, because, you know, I get nostalgic for eras, and I feel like I missed the 80s. So sometimes I'll go back and I'll just watch this, and it will remind me of simpler times in a simpler place. And it's majestic shots of the Canadian, you know, the Rockies and the prairies and all this natural wonderland we live in. And then it'll be crowds in like Byward Market in Ottawa or in Toronto or someplace like that. Scenes of Canadiana, man, as we imagined it to be. And then at the end of Oh Canada, it would go off the air and you'd see like the colored bars come up and you might hear something like that. What's going on in my head when I look at Chris Cuthbert is that. Because I freaked out, man. I panicked. And it was just him and me. And he's begging me to come over with his eyes. I can sense it. I'm an empath. He's begging me with his eyes to come over and please just talk to me, man. I got a book here and nobody cares. And I didn't do it. And I should have done it. I should have done it, man. But I freaked out, you know. I blanked. That's Chris Cuthbert, man. What am I going to say to this guy? And, you know, I was a kid, all right? I was in my 20s, all right? You feel like you're all grown up in your 20s. You're married and you live in Kingston and you're writing a novel. And when you're in your late 40s like me, you look back and say, kid punk. And I look back and say that at 42-year-old me as well, by the way. And in a couple of years when I turn 50, I'll look back at 47-year-old me and think the same thing. And that's the circle of life, man. That's how it goes, all right? You always, you know, if you're doing it right, you always realize how wrong you had it just a couple years ago. So I should have talked to Chris Cuthbert, and I didn't. And I didn't. I didn't talk to Chris Cuthbert. And how great would it be to be able to sit here right now and tell you, I spent half an hour just jamming with Chris Cuthbert, man. Talking hockey, talking writing, having this great experience. And he and I, you know, we stayed in touch, man. We became friends and I had him on the podcast. And, you know, we have a wobbly pop every now and again, even though I don't really like wobbly pops. But Cuthbert's a bit of a lush, you know what I mean? You want to hang out with the guy, you got to drink a little bit. Could have been, man. Could have been. And I mention it now because hockey's back, all right? And now I'm listening every night to Chris Cuthbert calling the games, man. Because he's like the number one guy on Sportsnet or something like that. He's calling the big ones. Which usually means you're calling the Leafs, and I don't watch the Leafs because I watch good hockey. But opening night, it was my beloved Habs versus the Leafs, all right? And the referees won that game for Toronto. We'll get them next time around. But Cuthbert's calling the game, man. And it made me remember that fateful day back in I want to say it was 98, when young me, full of literature, with stars in his eyes, blacked out, looking dead in the face, Mr. Chris Cuthbert himself, who calls a wonderful game, by the way. And, you know, playoffs, if I can't have Bob Cole, Cuthbert calling the playoffs, fabulous. There's an art to play-by-play, man. Now, I provide the color on the Music Trivia League broadcasts. Color's one thing, you know. You chime in every now and again, you say something pithy. You say something with some nuance, something of relevance to the strategy of the game or what just happened. But the play-by-play, man, I marvel at dudes and ladies who can call play-by-play. Because the ability to follow what's going on, understand the context of what's going on, and just call it and stay on it and be interesting, it's a weird thing. You know, when you watch the game on TV, at a certain point, you stop and you think, why is there a dude telling me what's happening? I know what's happening. I can see it. But this is, it goes back to the glory days of radio, man. And we used to listen to the game on the radio. And that's still a fun thing to do, but for me, it only works with baseball. Baseball listened to on the radio on a Sunday evening drive, from somewhere to somewhere on the highway. Put on the ball game. I don't know, there's a certain kind of nostalgia in that for me too, I'm not a big baseball guy unless the Jays make the playoffs, which is a rare occurrence, man. So, we were all huge baseball people in the early 90s when the Jays were good and they were winning World Series. I was working at the grocery store. We'd have the playoff game on the Muzak. We'd pipe in the radio so people going around could hear. And, there'd be a Jesse Barfield. Maybe Barfield's too early. I don't remember. But, Joe Carter would smack a double in the 9th inning, and you'd hear people clapping throughout the store. Or it would be announced that the Terminator was coming in to close it down, Hanky in the 9th inning. And there'd be a ripple go through the store. Those are good days, man. That was collective, shared experience. Kind of like when the Raptors won the NBA Finals a couple years ago. I was on the road when that happened. I was out west, all right? I was as far from Toronto as you can kind of get and still be in Canada. But this was all across the dang country, man. So, the Raptors game was on in every club we went into. And people were watching and people were cheering. Shared experience, man. That's the power of sports. That's what it is, man. It's tribalism, and sometimes it's toxic, and sometimes it's beautiful. And either way, Chris Cuthbert calls a fine game. And I should have talked to him, and I didn't. Now, I realized this week that I can kind of commit to hockey this year in a way that I haven't in quite a long time. I was a big hockey fan growing up. I'm far more of a soccer fan now, and I apply a lot more of my emotional energy to the Premier League and to Arsenal. And there are reasons for that, but hockey kind of lost me along the way. Now, it does not help that Les Glorieux, Les Canadiens, have not been great since 1993. And Leaf fans will snicker at that, but you ain't been great since, the 60s, man. If you were even great then. So the Habs haven't been great to follow, and I've been kind of caught up in this sense of North American sports being kind of Mickey Mouse in terms of how they operate, in terms of the draft, and your team has to be really, really bad before it can be really, really good. And if it gets to be really, really good, it can't stay really, really good. Everybody's got to have a turn, kids. It feels a little bit primary school to me. Now, I'm not saying soccer in Europe is a better system, right? Because over there, it's all driven by who's got all the money. So you can buy your way to the top, and teams have done it. Manchester City, Chelsea. And that's not so good either. So you get like in Italy where Juventus wins the title every year. Or Germany where Bayern Munich wins the title every year. Or Spain where Barcelona and Real Madrid trade the title every year. Although this year a little bit different. England is better because there are more teams that are competitive because there's more money in England. So everybody's got kind of more resources to work with. You still get the usual suspects at the top, but it's a little more balanced, right? But if you're in the English Premier League, you're competing to win the league. You're competing for the top 4 spots to get into the Champions League, which is a major club European competition, or to get into the Europa League, which is the second-tier major European competition, right? And you've got the FA Cup you're playing for and the League Cup you're playing for, right? And then if you're at the bottom of the table, in North America, you fail for nail, man. You tank. You tank to try to get a high draft pick so your team can be good one day. In football, real football, in soccer, you're at the bottom of the table. You're not failing for nail. You're trying to survive, man, because the bottom 3 teams are getting relegated. The bottom 3 teams are dropping out of that league, and 3 teams are coming up from down below. And dropping out of the league is a catastrophe, man, in terms of your prestige and your finances. So, apart from a handful of teams in the middle who ain't going to win anything but aren't going to lose either, everybody else has got something to play for, man. And there's new teams coming and there's teams dropping out, and then you're in a European tournament where you're playing who knows, you might be playing some team from Moscow or Schweden. You're playing teams from all over the place, and it's interesting. And in the NHL, you're playing the Buffalo Sabres 7 times. Who cares, man? I just began to lose interest in hockey, all right? For all of those reasons and maybe a few more. But this year, owing to the fact that I canceled my gym membership for the first time in like 30 years off and on, I have not had a gym membership. Because the gym's been, COVIDized. If it's open at all, it's a bit of a pain. I began to accrue equipment during the pandemic in the past year. I began to gather equipment. I bought old weights from people and I restored them to the best of my limited ability. And I built kind of a gym again in my own home. So now I'm at home in the evening and not at the gym. And, I can watch hockey games again. And so I've watched 2 Canadiens games this year, and I'm hoping to rekindle a kind of passion for the game and for the team. And we'll see what happens. This is a really topsy-turvy kind of year. There's like a 1 Canadian division of teams. So, yeah, we're going to see the same teams over and over and over and over and over. But there's a certain novelty in that. I don't know. But I'm going to try, and I'm going to be home. So, I'm giving hockey a go again. And it's the voice of Chris Cuthbert that I hear. And it makes me think of those days back in the late 90s when the living was easy, man. And Chris Cuthbert was hanging around, and I did not talk to him. What else is going on? Watching a bit of hockey for the first time in a long time. Watching the Queen's Gambit. Do you know the Queen's Gambit, kids? I am not a great watcher of television series anymore. Now, you flash back to the 90s, Cuthbert, all that stuff. Big Seinfeld guy. Never missed a Seinfeld episode if I didn't have to on Thursday night. And that's the way TV used to be, kids. You couldn't stream it. It was not on demand. You had to get yourself with your drink and sit down at 9 o'clock and watch Seinfeld if you wanted to see Seinfeld. And so I was a watcher of series television in those days. Lately, not so much. I watch your football on the TV, your real football. And, I watch various things on the Netflix or the Prime or whatever. I haven't watched a lot of series television. My wife watches almost everything as far as I can tell. So I don't know what the buzz shows are or whatever. We tried the Queen's Gambit because everybody seems to love that. And I kind of love it too. Love it's pushing it. But it's hooked me just a little bit. Strange thing. This is a show about a chess prodigy, and everybody says that. It's like, what is the appeal here? Who plays chess anyways, and what's the big deal? But there's something compelling about this program. I ain't going to give away all the spoilers, but for some reason, I'm into it. And I figured out something, all right? Now, I've always wanted to be good at chess, and I'm not, right? I've always been enamored of the idea of being good at chess because that's a sophisticated kind of thing, Feels like you should be in one of those Dos Equis commercials, I'm the most interesting man in the world, and of course I play chess well. And I don't play chess well. I'm not good at big strategy, all right? The key to chess, they talk about, the great players see 4, 5, 6 moves ahead. I'm like, dude, I see one move, and it's probably the wrong one. But I downloaded an app. There's finally an app that will help you understand not just what to move, but why to move it. That's always been kind of the thing for me. I needed principles, all right? Now, I've got books. I got chess books, and you open them up, and there are drawings of chess games and pieces in various places. And lots of, it looks like math, dude. And I do not do math, all right? Most people are a balance, right? They have math and they have words. And there's some balance of the two. It may weight slightly in one direction or another, all right? If we're picturing my talent teeter-totter, my I get it teeter-totter, words are pushing right into the center of the earth, and math is somewhere up in the sky. It can't come back down. I'm weighted so hard towards words that it kind of cracks me in half, all right? I don't get math. I don't get squigglies. I just don't process them, all right? I don't do shapes. I don't do symbols. Not those kinds of symbols. CYMBALS I get. SYMBOLS I don't get, all right? And so I have the same problem with reading music. You know, you put scribbles on a page for me, and I can read the basics of drum music, right? But when things get a little bit more busy looking, a little more convoluted, I don't process that quickly or well, okay? That sucks. It's a sad thing. I'd like to be able to do that better, and I suppose there's practice. But I look at the chess writings, and they're like, here's the opening. You know, mate in 7 moves. I'm like, can't really do that. Can't read it off a book and figure it out. I used to have a calendar back when I worked a real job back in the day. Had like one of those paper calendars where you rip the day off, but every day's got something on it. And it was chess problems, right? All right, here's today's chess problem. Get your queen out of this jam in 5 moves. Screw it. Like I can't process, I can't think to that level. But you get this character in the Queen's Gambit who is a young chess prodigy. And she has this imagination. She gets it. I don't know what else to say except she gets it. Some people just get it, man. Every now and again, people send me videos of 10-year-old drummers playing the most complicated stuff, you know? And people think I'm impressed and want to see that. I'm not, and I don't, all right? All you're doing is lining up a whole lot of prodigies that I have to eliminate. I don't want to see that. I don't need to see an 8-year-old that's better than me, okay? But some people just get it. It just clicks. There's a micro focus and a talent that just works, man. And this kid, this girl, has it with chess, all right? And there's just something about the way this story unfolds that's compelling, and it keeps you coming back, and I don't even really know why, because it's chess, and half the time they're talking gibberish. Even to those of us who know what the pieces are and understand not exactly what they're saying, but a bit of the language about chess, all right? Well, you know, your queen was pinned on whatever, and I get that. Well, there's a fork here and a discovered attack there, and we're playing the Sicilian. And it makes you think of, you know, the Princess Bride. Have you studied your Capoferro? And so, I don't know, even for those of us who kind of not exactly speak the language but have heard a bit of it, it's still chess, and how interesting can it be? But it is, you know? And I found out that one of the things that I dig about it, one of the things that works for me, is that it's set in the 60s, all right? Now, there's a scene in one of the early episodes where, you know, this orphan girl's she's going into the suburbs, right, of whatever city, you know, Main Street, USA in the 60s. And she pulls into this suburb, right? Perfectly manicured lawns and the picket fences and the cars from the 60s and whatever. And it dawns on me watching this. I'm like, why am I so compelled by this? You know that I get nostalgic for eras that I did not experience. And so I'm watching her drive into this suburb and I'm like, wait a minute. This is Nuketown. Oh! Do you know Nuketown, kids? Okay. Nuketown is one of the great and most iconic multiplayer Call of Duty maps that's ever been produced. I don't know if you play Call of Duty online or not. If you do, you know about Nuketown. And the whole premise of Nuketown is you're playing in this one sort of sectioned off area of a little neighborhood that's been fabricated for testing nuclear weapons, all right? Now, granted, Queen's Gambit is in the 60s and Nuketown is more of a 50s thing, but it looks very similar, okay? And so on this Nuketown map, which is a tiny map, right? 2 houses facing each other in this kind of cul-de-sac with the picket fences and the backyards and 2-story houses. You can go up and down each house and then different floors. And you can sit in the window and try to pick people off before somebody comes along and runs a shiv in your back, which inevitably will happen. And there's little signs. It's like a for sale. That's like a new development kind of thing, you know, the 50s, you know. This great promise, everybody's back from the war and we've all got jobs and we're building cars and the factories are churning out products for the American marketplace. And it's the wife stays home and dad goes to work and wait till your father gets home and all that stuff. This is the little neighborhood they've created. And there's like cars parked out front and you can blow up the cars and hopefully take off somebody's head when you do it. And there are trucks parked in the middle and you can hide here and there and it's very close quarters combat. Ain't no place to hide on Nuketown. They will find you. And I've spent a lot of time wandering around Nuketown having my head blown off or my kneecaps shot out or having knives jammed in my back by people who are way better at Call of Duty than I am. But you develop a certain affection for those maps. You know, the old battlefields where you've pitched battle these many times low these many years ago. You remember hiding underneath the sign on Nuketown and picking people off before they stuck a grenade to you and you blew into 1,000 pieces? It's okay, you regenerate a few seconds later. But you're still mad. That's Call of Duty. And Call of Duty is a weird addiction. It's a toxic addiction, man, when you're as terrible at it as I am, and yet you keep coming back for more punishment. Because today's the day I'm going to figure it out. I changed my weapons class. I got little submachine gun now. Much lighter, much faster movement. Pretty accurate. Not as much damage as the assault rifles, but I think I can get it with the accuracy, right? Never works. Never works. Every now and again, you know, the blind squirrel finds a nut and you get a decent round. But otherwise, these 8-year-olds who aren't even supposed to be playing this game are chewing you to pieces, man. But I'm watching the Queen's Gambit and it looks like Nuketown, you know? And the whole, as I said, the concept of Nuketown, and this sort of thing existed, I think, you know, back in the 50s when they were testing out nuclear weapons. So they would build this neighborhood simulating, you know, life somewhere in the world. And then they'd drop a test weapon and see what happens. See who blows up, see how much destruction there is. And, you know, at the end of Nuketown games on multiplayer, a bomb will go off, you know, on some versions of it. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it'll blow up in the end because it's Nuketown. And the whole idea is to test how much destruction we can cause. How many stay-at-home moms can we melt in Nuketown? Pretty sick, but a fun map to play. And I play now on Black Ops 2, which is an ancient Call of Duty game. I don't play online anymore because way too frustrating. But I will play games against AI bots that I can beat. And it's fun to run around Nuketown and actually get some kills, man. But Queen's Gambit looks like Nuketown, and I thought that was maybe an appeal for me. But it's a cool show, man. And, you know, lockdown is back, and people are looking for stuff to occupy themselves with. Little distraction from the anxiety, the uncertainty, the fear in the world, which I know is still affecting a lot of people. I got some response to last week's episode where I talked about the anxiety, man. People were like, yeah, I'm feeling that. And I'm still seeing posts on Facebook to that effect. One of the things to do is have a bit of a distraction, and the Queen's Gambit provides one. It's a compelling program, man. And you don't have to be into chess, because it's not so much about chess. Chess is the framework for it, right? Chess is the driving force behind it, but you don't have to understand chess, and they don't make you understand chess. Stuff happens on the chessboard, and you're like, okay. And then somebody wins or somebody loses, and that is consequential. That matters. And how this young character develops as a sort of damaged person, and it's like a powder keg. You're like, something's going to happen here. And they're building to it. You know, I'm getting towards the end of the first season, which is only like 7 episodes or something like that. But it's compelling, and it's a good show, and it's got some drama, and it's got just a hint of romance, and it's got this weird vibe that I can't even really describe, man. You got to watch it for yourself. And yeah, I downloaded a chess app that's teaching me some of the concepts of chess, right? And I don't know to what end, but it's been kind of fun for me to try to learn, okay? And if chess ain't your thing, if that's not what you're into, I'm going to recommend, available on Prime, The Trip to Greece. Do you know the Trip movies, man? Okay, this is the 4th Trip movie, and it stars Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon, 2 very funny Englishmen, playing kind of fictionalized, exaggerated versions of themselves, all right? So you got Steve Coogan, multiple BAFTA-winning Hollywood star, and he's this kind of self-obsessed, self-important, kind of sad, troubled artist guy. And Rob Brydon, who's like the happy-go-lucky companion on these road trips. And the concept is Coogan gets sent off to do like travel pieces for the Observer, and Brydon goes along with him as his sidekick. And the two of them have these adventures, initially in the north of England for the first movie, then the trip to Spain, then the trip to Italy, then the trip to Greece, which is the most recent one. And the movies are kind of fundamentally the same. It's the two of them on the road, and they're basically just riffing. Apparently this is a TV show that then they cut into feature. I've never seen the TV part of it. I've only seen the feature-length movies that they make, which come off as being part travelogue because you're seeing all these amazing shots, man. This amazing cinematography like I talked about with the Grand Tour, right? Just beautiful sweeping views of these in Spain and Italy, Greece. Really beautiful, man. And they're eating at these high-end restaurants. This is not a documentary. This is all fictionalized, all right? This is all a movie. But they're still showing you these things, right? And it's very cool. But what's great about the movies is it's Brydon and Coogan kind of working together, kind of working against each other in terms of doing impressions, doing voices, and they're just constantly acting out scenes and doing impressions. And they're scenes from famous movies, but they're done within the context of this movie, where they'll just be sitting at a dinner table and they'll be doing Sean Connery, or they'll be doing Billy Connolly or something like that. Or they'll be doing, I think they'd riff on like the Terminator in the most recent movie, right? And they're just trying to outdo each other with impressions, these two characters in the movie as they travel along. And that's not for everybody, all right? It's not for everybody. It's not a silly comedy with a real plot. It's just not. It's episodic, it's scenes, but these two guys are so funny. And their impressions are so funny, and what they come up with is so funny. And most of this is ad-libbed, I'm sure. I don't know how you would script it. And if you haven't heard Rob Brydon do his tiny man locked in a box voice, I would love to be able to imitate it, but I cannot. Rob Brydon, tiny man trapped in a box, so funny. And Steve Coogan's funny, but it's interesting because, these are episodic things and they're just traveling to different beautiful places and riffing and going back at each other and bickering at each other and trying to outdo each other, And then there's a subtext, though, running through all of it. And in each episode, there's something happening back in England or in America or off screen that's, in a lot of cases really sad. And the version of Steve Coogan who appears in these movies is kind of sad and kind of morose. And he's alone. He has a kid, but he's, lives alone. He doesn't really have anybody. Somewhat estranged from real life. Having this great career, but kind of sad. And Rob Brydon has a wife and kids and not the same level of fame and success as Steve Coogan, but he seems to have found this balance, And Coogan's always got something happening off screen that's undercutting this trip and distracting him from it. And it's about him, this character version of him, trying to find the kind of balance that Rob Brydon has between career and family and what's really important. And this kind of current runs underneath these movies, And they're really quite funny and actually very moving in certain cases. Not for everybody. If you want a slapstick American comedy, The Trip is not it. It's somewhat more sophisticado. But these movies are really funny, and so if The Queen's Gambit ain't your thing, maybe you want to check out a movie. Check out The Trip to Greece on Prime. And then watch The Trip to Spain, The Trip to Italy, the original Trip movie, which is probably still the best one, the funniest one to me. But I really like these movies, man. And so if you're looking for something to occupy yourself, there you go. How did 40 minutes happen? I don't know if by the time I've done my editing, it'll still be at 40 minutes, but this thing is flying by, man. And I was just supposed to talk about those things just briefly to engage you before I got to the heart of the order, to the meat of it all, which is the John Huff Podcast Put Your Indie Out There playlist. That's what we're spinning today, kids. I don't know if spinning's going to be an every week kind of thing. That may indeed be up to you guys in the end, if you want me to keep spinning records and talking about them. But I do want to talk about this playlist that I've put together. The very first playlist launched by the John Huff Podcast. You can find it on Spotify. Put Your Indie Out There playlist, which I launched last week to great fanfare. And what this is a playlist that I've begun of indie rock bands and independent artists. Indie kind of wears two hats in the music world. You know, you say somebody's an indie band, and that evokes a certain sound, college music, man, REM, alternative rock and roll, right? And I really dig on the indie rock, but then indie also means independent, right? That could be a classical pianist who independently releases records. That could be a death metal band from Norway that also independently releases records. So indie is a style, is a genre, and also kind of like a classification. But what we're dealing with here is indie rock bands. And I went scouring around for recently released indie rock tunes because I really like this music, man. And the more I get into like the war on drugs and that kind of thing, the more I'm into kind of the alt rock and like the national, you know. And I kind of play a lot of this stuff, and I drift into that kind of vein as a player. And so I'm following along, and, you know, I do publicity for some independent artists, and I know how dang hard it is for them to get any notice or recognition whatsoever. So I thought I would create just a little venue for some independent acts to be playlisted and to maybe be discovered by people like you, the fine listeners of this program. And if you listen to my show, especially after the last dozen or so episodes, you're likely a music fan, so you may not know some of these artists. And that's the point, kids. I want to introduce you to some new stuff. Now, you know one of my endeavors this year is to listen to more music. Discover some new stuff, discover some old stuff, just stuff I have not listened to before, okay? And so my contribution to that, for all of you, is what will be a series of John Huff Podcast playlists on Spotify, the first of which is Put Your Indie Out There. Now, I'm not going to talk about all of it. It's like 17 tunes, and I will be adding to it, and it'll be changing. You know, keep checking back, keep listening in. There'll be some new tunes, you know, stuff will fade, stuff will come in. It'll get longer, whatever. There'll be more songs on it. But I want to highlight just a few things. You know, I've listened to this playlist all week, and I like all these tunes, do not get me wrong. But some of them have really grown on me, all right, in the past week. And I've been marveling a little bit to myself just how chill this list is. You get into indie rock, you can get into some pretty banging stuff, like some of the older Archers of Loaf stuff. You know, this crazy noise rock and stuff like that. It can get pretty riotous, kids. This list that I've initially created is pretty chill, but that's where I'm at right now, okay? That's what I'm digging on. So what I want to highlight is the first song on the list, and what else could it be but Magic Man by Jackie Neville. Now, we had Jackie on the program, the White Whale interview that I chased for 5 dang years before I finally got Jackie Neville from the Balconies on the show. And go back, 12 or 13 episodes, you'll find it. And Jackie's great, and I loved the Balconies so freaking much. The Balconies should have been huge, man. And it didn't work out. You know, that's the way it goes for most bands, even the really dang good ones. Then Jackie reappeared recently and started producing some music under her own name, Jackie Neville. And she dropped this single earlier this year called Magic Man, which I just love. And the first time I heard her play it was actually a Facebook live stream, and she just played it on her and her electric guitar. Really subtle, really chill, you know, it's got this kind of darkness to it, but so freaking catchy. And Jackie is a master at catchy, man. I don't know how she does it, but there's got a whole, there's a Fleetwood Mac thing happening on this tune. And then there was a Fleetwood Mac thing happening on the final Balconies record called Rhonda. Concept album about this character, Rhonda. You know, if you're a Balconies fan, there's kind of two ways you can go, all right? You can go the fast motions direction, which is where I discovered the Balconies. And that's more of like a hard rock album. Jackie's screeching, you know, she's such a terrifying and wonderful front woman. And, you know, Fast Motions was just a great hard rock record. Then Rhonda came next. It's more of a pop record. It's still, you know, guitar based and all that stuff, but there was more electronic kind of vibe to it, more of a pop vibe to it. Had a real Fleetwood Mac thing happening, and I am a Fleetwood Mac guy, dude. All right. And so that continues with Magic Man, the first single on the playlist, the most recent single by Jackie Neville. Love it. It's got a darkness, and it's cool. And I found that there's a darkness running through this entire playlist, man. There's a tune called Northern California by this band from LA called Lyman Lyman. I think that's how you pronounce the name, Lyman Lyman. Great tune. Bit of a pop vibe. All right. It's poppier than I would have expected me to put on this list, but again, dark, kind of minor chords. A lot of minor chords happening, dude. This is a good driving playlist. I seem to be writing a lot of driving music, and maybe that's because I ain't driving anywhere, man. Some subconscious part of me is pining to move, man. Used to being on the road, used to having hours to kill, and this playlist would be great for doing that. So if we ever get to drive again, put on the Put Your Indie Out There playlist, man, and that'll help you along. I like that tune by Lyman Lyman. Then, of course, we have our old friend Denny Boy. Denny Boy's tune Next Line from his most recent record, He Said, She Said, which is a great little record, man. If you're into the beautiful singer-songwriter stuff, Denny certainly does that. But on that new record, branches off a little bit into rock territory, man, and Next Line is one of those tunes. Just a great tune. Also dark, man. And lyrically super cool, man. It's like Next Line. He's talking about being an actor. You ever been in the theater, kids? When an actor is rehearsing, you know, and is trying to get off book, trying to get off script so that they have the words memorized. Sometimes they'll get stuck and we'll say line, and the prompter down there will tell them or her what the line is that's coming next, and they'll pick it up and go. And there's a lyric in this song, Next Line, about that, you know? Maybe I'm just here to let you go so you can move on to a better part of the show, to say next line, and life will tell you what you want to say. It's about the uncertainty in a relationship. It's about letting people go. It's about this idea that sometimes things aren't forever, kids. Sometimes you're just here to let somebody go on to the next thing, you know, to say next line, and life will tell you what you want to say. I've been able to play that song with Denny a bunch of times. It's a fun song to play, man. Really cool tune by our old friend Denny Boy. There's a tune on there by Land of Talk. I don't know if you know Land of Talk. That's Elizabeth Powell. Wonderful, kind of dreamy pop indie vibe. Land of Talk is a popular band, all right? They're like a label band, and I first heard them on CBC several years ago. I forget which song it was. And again, this kind of dark pop sensibility, guitar driven, these ethereal kind of dreamy vocals, Land of Talk, really great band. And I chose the song Weight of That Weekend from their most recent record. I don't know if it's their or her most recent record. I don't know. They describe it as a band. Elizabeth Powell, who is a freaking genius. What a wonderful songwriter she is. It's her band. It's her project. It's her thing. And she used to play in Broken Social Scene, if you're into that. She's worked with Justin Vernon from Bon Iver. And Bon Iver seems to be popping up regularly on this program. Great song by Land of Talk called Weight of That Weekend. There's a band from Austin, Texas called Why Bonnie, which reminds me of Land of Talk. If you listen to this playlist, there's a theme repeating in terms of musicality. These tunes really do fit together well, but a lot of them are very similar. It's like a female vocal over this kind of dreamy, dark pop sound, which is not 100% pop, is guitar driven, you know, mostly. But this is just another one, this band, Why Bonnie, and it's super cool. Also has a Fleetwood Mac kind of thing, this dream pop kind of thing, you know, and I dig it. Why Bonnie is a cool band. Then we go on to this band, Wilson. Another cool tune, same kind of vibe. I don't know, man. There's like a pocket that I'm sitting in right now. They talk about the polar vortex, man. That bad winter weather that just sits on top of your city and spins for 2 months and makes it -20 every day. I got kind of a musical vortex happening here where I'm into these quiet, chill, dark, female vocal-led kind of indie rock tunes. That's another one, A Line by Wilson. It's cool. I put on my dear friend Kelte's tune Butterfly, which is a brand new single, which I was happy to be the PR guy for, as I was for Denny's single. And Kelte is a great story. I'll tell you more about Kelte later down the line. But this tune Butterfly, which is about her emerging like a butterfly from being out of music for a long time. I played on Kelte's EP release show like 5 years ago when she dropped her most recent record, which was a very 90s pop kind of country vibey sort of tunes. Much different now. Kelte's gone through some stuff. She's a really emotive and evocative songwriter, has a really cool voice. And Butterfly is this deep emotional tune about her re-emerging from a period of darkness, And it's just a bit of a change of pace. Piano song, very poppy and emotive, and Kelte is great, and that's why I put her song on my little playlist, man. Then another friend of mine, The Universe, featuring Ray. I met Ray a few years ago in the scene. I was lucky enough to perform with her one time, 3 songs, playing my little box. And Ray is terrifying and mesmerizing, supremely colorful. Normally when she performs as The Universe featuring Ray, it's just her and her guitar. A lot of colors, a lot of her jumping around, a lot of her being really terrifying, man. But she has the greatest voice. I sometimes think about the people I've played with and how well they can sing and whatever. Ray has flown just a little bit under the radar for her vocal work because her show is so dazzling and spectacular. She's such a visual thing. There's like makeup and it's pretty great, man, but it's also terrifying because she's terrifying. She has this energy, man. It's like kinetic and a little bit dangerous. And she's a really great performer, but she's also an amazing singer, man. If you cut through kind of the performance stuff and just listen to this girl's voice, she's really freaking good, man. And I've been able to rehearse with her and stuff and hear that kind of literally face to face. And what a great voice she has, man. So there's a tune called My Fragile Mind by The Universe featuring Ray. Ups the intensity, man. Ups the rock and roll factor just a little bit from a list that was getting pretty chill. And then Ray comes along and blows that out of the water, man. There's also a cool video for this tune. It was released very, very recently, so go check out The Universe featuring Ray. You can hear this single on my playlist. You can see it on the YouTube. Then there's a tune by Dumb Angel, which is, it's Sean Mason is Dumb Angel. He's the songwriter. Saskatchewan dude who I met when I was still doing the London Groove Machine back in the day. I interviewed Dumb Angel. I interviewed Sean because whatever record it was he had just released at that point was out. And I guess he came to town probably to play a show. So I went and interviewed him. Got a cool shirt. And Dumb Angel is like doom pop. No, that's not even right. Doom folk, doom something. I say doom because all of his songs are so slow. You ever go see a doom band play and it's like dun, 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 just so slow, man. Slow and heavy. Well, Dumb Angel is slow and dreamy, okay? And Sean writes these just beautiful songs, man. Just beautiful freaking songs. Emotional. It's full band. It's a lot of like orchestral kind of stuff happening. It feels like there's a lot of sounds. These tunes are soundscapes more than anything, maybe. And he writes these kind of nice sort of lilting melodies over them. Very emotive, still very hooky somehow. Dumb Angel, if you need a record to just chill to, that's going to be quiet and dreamy, it's going to take you on a ride, go listen to anything that Dumb Angel has produced. And I never asked Sean, I don't think, where the name comes from. Maybe I did, I can't remember. But I put on his song, Out of Time, from his most recent record. It's really great. When you read the bio for the band, They use words like luminous and shimmering and spaced out. Prairie orchestral is how Dumb Angel describes itself. Really, really beautiful songs. Go check out Dumb Angel, man. And time is a wasting. Time's going by. I gotta point out freaking Sky Wallace. Dude, Sky Wallace. I put on her song Death of Me from her 2019 self-titled record. Sky Wallace is great. I discovered her in 2019. I went down to the old London Music Hall to see Matt Mays. Everybody likes Matt Mays, right? Matt Mays was playing in those days, and still, but in those days, I think I was probably just back off the road with Sarah, and I was kind of looking more seriously into how to raise my game, man. And so I'm watching full shows on the YouTube. Your Sheryl Crows, right? Your Melissa Etheridges, because that's the vein I was playing in. And I wanted to watch what the drummers are doing, how they're conducting themselves, what they're playing. Wanted to see what people at that level are doing, man. That's how you learn, man. You learn by watching and studying and taking things from the people who are at the level you want to get to, man. I always say to the kids, I say, put together a show for the stage you want to play, man. Don't just do the Friday night bar band thing, man. If you want to play arenas, start building a show for arenas. Dress for the job you want, kids. And so I was doing that. I was watching shows, and I still do that, trying to figure out, I watched Chris Powell play with Brandi Carlile earlier in the pandemic. Talked about that, and it was mind blown, dude. It's like, this is what a pro does. So I went to see the Matt Mays show at London Music Hall because I wanted to watch Matt Mays do his thing, man. This is like Americana, indie kind of vibe, right? That's the zone I was playing in. So I went to watch his drummer and his band and how they conduct themselves and what they play and what makes their show at that level and maybe my show at this level. What's the difference, man? And I think the answer is hats. But opening the show was Sky Wallace and her band from Toronto, okay? Now, I didn't used to be an opening band kind of guy, right? Used to skip the opening band as much as possible because I'm here to see the headliners, man. I don't want to see the opening band. That changed when I started playing in the opening band. Then I began to realize for a lot of the opening bands, especially if it's local support, sometimes there'll be like a tour happening and there'll be a headliner and an opener on every show of that tour. But when they get to each town, if there's a venue that's helping out the local scene, a local opener will open for the opener. And I've been that person a couple of times, all right? And what you don't realize, particularly if you're the opener for the opener, what you don't realize in the audience is that a dream is coming true, kids. The chance to play their real music in a real venue for a real audience. Not to a sea of empty seats, not to some awful ratty bar someplace full of drunks, if it's full of anybody. A real stage in a real venue with like freaking lights and stuff. And a proper sound check, man. And a guy who just runs monitors. When we start playing in bands, we're just dying to do that one freaking time, man. And the opener for the opener is probably having that experience. And there ain't nothing more deflating for the opener to finally get their chance to play that 1,000-seat room for a real band, opening for a real band, and to get up there to play, and there ain't nobody there. Man, so go see the opener for the opener, okay? Those people on that stage are having a dream come true. They've been working at this forever, man, and all they want is to play to some freaking people. So go and be those people, all right? You will change a life and you will create a memory for a lot of people who may never get that chance again, all right? The people who are opening for the opener are not taking that for granted. And even the opener, a lot of cases, is on their first tour, or their first tour at this level. They've been banging around headlining beer halls, and they're finally getting to play like nice rooms for a change. Go support the openers, man, and you might find somebody you like Sky Wallace. Sky Wallace was great. Her band was awesome. They were super tight. She's got kind of like this punk, just a little bit of a punk thing happening. This is like definitely Again, like Ray, upping the tempo, upping the intensity, upping the rock and roll factor on this playlist. Skye Wallace's tune, Death of Me. She's super great. Really like her. Go check out her music. I'm also going to point out just a couple more I'm going to point out. There's this band that I added called Jackie, all right? And it's really just a girl called Jackie and her band. And this tune called Lifetime in a Touch, which is the catchiest freaking tune. Again, it's almost a pop song, but it's still like got guitars happening. And it's just catchy. It's one of the tunes that has grown on me more and more and more and more. Lifetime in a Touch by Jackie. Jackie from Toronto. Not Jackie Neville. That's Jacquie. This is Jackie, spelled the more traditional English way. And I did some digging into Jackie because I like this tune so much. I'm like, man, some people can just write hooks, dude. Now, I've been slanging away with Ken the Zen's guitar over the past week, trying my best. No hooks, man. It's a talent, man. It's like chess. It's like those chess prodigies. Some people can just write a freaking hook. Sarah can do that. I can't do that, it seems. Jackie can. This Jackie person from Toronto. And so I'm digging in a little bit deeper, and I find out that Jackie is Jackie Moore. M-O-H-R. And I thought, that's curious. Moore from Toronto. Could she be related somehow to the band The Moors? And I dig in a little deeper, and I realize that Jackie Moore is Jackie Moore of The Moors. Now, you probably don't know The Moors, but they were an indie band kicking around Toronto in the past 5, 6, 7 years. Really great, just a really great band playing the bars of Toronto. And I discovered The Moors when I went to see the Balconies play the Horseshoe. I think it was the Horseshoe. And the Balconies, they announced they were breaking up, broke everybody's freaking heart. They were going to play 3 farewell gigs, one of which was in Toronto at the Horseshoe in a February Friday night or something like that. And so I trundled down, braved the weather, and drove down to Toronto to see the Balconies play one last time. The last rock star in flight one last time. And opening that show was a killer band that I really liked called The Moors. And you fast forward 3 years, 4 years, whatever it's been, and all of a sudden I'm listening to this tune and I'm putting it on my indie playlist because I really dig it, by this band called Jackie, who it turns out is the freaking Moors. And that's the circle of life, kids. That's how this happens. The first song on the freaking thing on the playlist is Jackie Neville of the Balconies. Later on, you get Jackie Moore of the Moors, who opened for the Balconies. And man, that's just worlds coming together, Makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. Warms my cockles, man. Jackie, Jackie, band from Toronto. Super hooky, really great songs, really fun, lots of deep groove. Pay attention to that band. And if you're a Toronto person and shows ever come back, go and see Jackie play, because Jackie Moore's got a thing, man. Some people just got a thing, and Jackie Moore is one of those folks. One more highlight to mention. My dear friend Karen Emine's tune Meant for This, which was the lead single from her EP released this year, The Right Mistakes. This year meaning 2020. I was supposed to play Karen's EP release show to play some of this music. Obviously that got canceled twice. Real bummer we never got to play it. I did PR on this single and another one from Karen's record. It's very cool. It's definitely independent, but has more of a pop vibe, 90s vibe. Very pretty. Meant for This is a really fun song, and cool video for it too, actually. If you go onto the YouTube, look at Meant for This by Karen Emine. Cool song, cool video. Happy to put it on this playlist. And I want you to go and listen to the John Huff Podcast Put Your Indie Out There playlist. You can find it on the Spotify. Maybe I'll link to it somehow in my show notes. And, if you got music that you want me to check out, if there's stuff you want me to do a spin-in segment on, do indeed send it my way. Now, there's going to be another one. By the time this gets released, there will be another podcast playlist available on Spotify. It will be the Referenced on the Pod playlist, where you can go and you can hear some of the music we've been talking about all along. So you can certainly find Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes. You can hear some Stryper on there, some Kathleen Edwards, some Sarah Harmer, some Archers of Love. I kind of racked my brain and went through who have we talked about in the last few months. I'll put them all in a playlist. That way, you don't necessarily have to seek them out. You can just go to the Spotify, pull up the playlist, and you can hear the music I'm talking about, okay? At least until we reach a point where I can dang well play it on the podcast without getting arrested, okay? We've gone way over time. I hope you hung with me this long. Do go check out both of those playlists. Here's some music. Send me some music. Dude, I hope you're doing okay. I know I didn't deliver any sort of great kind of spiritual or personal development message today. But sometimes it's enough just to distract yourself from the anxiety, all right? Let's go watch The Trip, watch all those movies, watch The Queen's Gambit, listen to this playlist. I didn't even talk about the books that I bought, but that gives us something for next time. Hope you're doing okay. Gonna check out right now, man. Do take care of each other. Do take care of yourself. Go Habs, go. Support the Arsenal. Hope you're enjoying having hockey back. Gonna stop rambling now, and I'll check you later. Thank you once again, gentle listener, for taking in today's show. If you want to know more about the program, go to www.john-huff.com. That's JOHN-HUFF.com and click on podcast. You can also find the show on Facebook at The John Huff Podcast. If you're an Instagram person, you can find me at JW_Huff. If you're a Twitter person, you can find me at JWSHuff. No matter where you listen to the show, please do me a big, big favor and leave a rating and review. Preferably a positive one. That's all the time we have for today, but I'll be back very soon. Until then, keep your wits about you and remember, good things happen when you put yourself out there. Bye for now.
Here, white probably expected 1 queen to e6, 2 rook to d4, regaining his piece with an extra pawn, but instead, black played the defensive combination 1.
Huh?